Here is the instruction to help you complete the Immigration to the United States report, where you're going to learn how to set up footnotes or endnotes and how to format a table of contents. You should have a copy of the handout that's available by the books right now in front of you, so that as we go through this, the different features will make sense. Now, what I've done is I've typed one sentence from each paragraph to use as an example here. Obviously, you will be typing the entire thing. If you look at the side of the handout that shows the report you will be typing, you'll notice that I've said you should have a 2-inch gap between the title of your paper and the top of the page. Right now, my title of my report is right 1 inch down as I look at the left side of my paper, but if what I'd like you to do is actually press your return, in this case 3 times, because my line spacing is still set at normal, so that it is lined up 1 inch down from my paper. The reason I don't want to change my top margin to 2 inches is because then every single page of my paper will have a 2-inch top margin, and I only want to have the first page 2 inches down. That's a standard report feature. Now, the next thing on the back side of your paper, it tells you step by step the instructions you're going to do, and these are the things we're going to practice. I'd like you to type the immigration paper and put the title 1 inch on the vertical ruler right here, so just like mine is set up, and switch the line spacing to double spacing. Now, I did press my enter 2 times while I was still in normal, and now starting with my paper, I'm going to switch to actually what I'm going to do is go into the paragraph and switch it to double spacing here, because I want it consistently double spaced all the way down. When you do this after you type your entire paper, your paper will go on to a second page, because mine is, I didn't take the time to type all that text. Mine hasn't reached that far. Now, the next thing that you're going to do after you've typed your entire paper is you're going to add footnote references for each of the paragraphs. As you look at the paragraphs on the front side of the document now, you'll notice that you see a superscript or a raise, number 1 at the end of the first paragraph, number 2 at the end of the second, number 3 at the end of the third. This would be an example of a paper where a teacher asks you to use footnotes rather than using parenthetical citations. That's normally the type of citation you're asked to use. But I want you to be aware of how footnotes or endnotes work in case you're ever asked to use them for a report. The thing that's important to remember about footnotes or endnotes is that you need to enter them in the order that they occur. For example, I couldn't say, okay, I'm going to cite the information from my first paragraph, and now I'm going to jump down to the information from my final paragraph, and then I'm going to go back. No, you have to do it in number order, because that's how the software will number for you. And if you do it out of order, your footnotes won't be correctly numbered. They'll be random, and it'll be a little confusing to read. So anyway, I'm assuming I've typed my entire first paragraph, even though I only have one sentence here, and I'm ready to start setting up my footnotes or my citations for the facts and statistics that are in that particular paragraph. And how I do this is I go to the reference tab and I say I'd like to insert a footnote. Now, what's the difference between footnotes or endnotes? Footnotes look like what you see in this report sample. Okay, footnotes put the citation on the page that you're entering each of the citations. Endnotes group all of the documentation or all of the citations at the end of your paper. We're going to practice the footnote feature. So go ahead and make sure your cursor's at the end of your first paragraph. And once again, please type your entire report if you haven't already done so. Put your cursor at the end of your first paragraph and select Insert Footnote. You'll notice I immediately get a superscript raise number 1, and if I mouse over here, I also see that my cursor changes. This is supposed to be kind of like a note card that would have the reference. And then I look down at the bottom and it's brought me right to where I'm going to type that citation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the information that your report shows as being the source for this information. If your teacher advises you to underline your print sources, you will cite that way. The example you see with this handout is your titles have been italicized rather than underlined. Okay, so that's sort of a teacher preference thing. Either is correct format-wise. And I'm just going to finish this citation. Oops. Now, for our purposes, don't worry either. As you look at the footnote reference at the bottom of the page, you'll notice that the number 1 has been indented. Let's not worry about that. We're just going to let everything for the citations line up at the left margin. Okay, so now my second citation happens to be at the end of my second paragraph. And so I'm going to move my cursor there next. Once again, make sure you're entering your information in order. Also notice now when I mouse over the superscript for the first footnote, it shows me the reference information that I've just typed in. So I'm going to go back to references now. I'll go to insert footnote and you'll see it automatically brings me to number 2. And now I can type in the second footnote information as I'm working with that. And I think I'm not going to type the whole thing because I think you understand. So I'm going to say I'm done typing that. Now you obviously would type the entire thing. So you would go through then and you would do your third citation after your third paragraph, your fourth citation after your fourth paragraph, and your fifth citation after your fifth paragraph. And all of that information is provided for you. So if you go to the back side of the handout now, once you get all of those footnotes entered, you will have completed through step number 2. Now, we're also going to pretend this is a very giant research paper, and so you are asked to prepare a table of contents, and I want to show you how the software will do the work for you. What we need to do first is this. We are going to create a section title, kind of like a chapter title for each paragraph. Know that you would never ever do that in a paper. You would never ever create a chapter for each paragraph. Let's pretend the different sections are very long, a page and a half long. This ends up being a 20-page paper, and so a table of contents might be appropriate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor at the space between the title and the first line of my paper. I'm going to add another return there to set it off, and I'm going to switch back to left justification. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up a section title for each of these sections as if it were a chapter. Okay, so I'm going to say, as I skim through my first paragraph, I see that Nation of Immigrants makes sense for the title for that section, kind of like a chapter title. Okay, and I'm looking at the second section and I'm thinking Movement to America makes sense for a section title. Okay, third section I'm going to call Potato Famine. Fourth paragraph I'm going to title German Immigrants, and final one I'll say The Lure of America. Okay, so I have created section titles for each of my paragraphs. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to format each of these paragraph titles as a heading 1. That's going to allow the software to understand I am creating a table of contents. So I'm going to go and I'm going to select each of my section titles. I'm going to format them as a heading 1, and as if you remember from before, while I still have the first one selected, I can double click on the format painter and I can paint over each of these section titles. Okay, and now as soon as I did that, you'll notice it increased the spacing a little bit, which is okay, but even my brief paper now goes on to a second page. Yours might even go on to a third page at this point. I'm done painting those. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a page break here. I have to create a space for this table of contents to take place. All right, so right now this is centered. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert page break right here. So now my Immigration to the United States report begins on page 2 and I have a blank page on page 1. I'm going to come here and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a title for this page, which happens to be Table of Contents. And so because I'm still centered, if I'm not, go ahead and add the centering icon. But we're still centered here, so I'm in cap locks. I'm going to say Table of Contents, which is the title of this page that I'm doing. I'm going to return down and I'm going to go back to left justification. Okay, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to tell that the software that I'm ready to set up the table of contents. I go back to my References tab and I'm going to select Table of Contents here, and then as I'm looking at these I can see how the software is going to, I've got these different formats that I can choose from as far as what it looks like. Okay, so in this case automatic table 2 is what I've suggested you use for this table of contents. Now we've only formatted heading 1, so those are the only headings we're going to have. But if we did have some subheadings, you can see how as long as we formatted them, it would automatically give us that information. Okay, so as I'm looking at this, I am noticing that here it says Table of Contents again right here for that title. If I change my mind and I don't want that there, I can take that out because I've already titled my table. And here are those 5 section titles along with page numbers that it's automatically set up for me. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is fix my page numbering. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to, with my cursor still on my Table of Contents page, this new page, I'm going to go to Insert, and rather than going into the header or footer piece of information, I'm going to go right to page numbering. And I'm going to decide where I want those page numbers to be. But before I select that, I'm actually going to go into Format Page Numbering, because what I'm going to tell it is that I'd like it to start at page number 0, because I don't want the first page of my report to be counted as page 1 of my report. I actually say, okay, I want to start it at number 0, okay, but I haven't put it anywhere yet. So now at this point in time with my page numbering, I can say, okay, do I want it to be at the top? And you could make that decision. Maybe I'll just go ahead and put my page numbering here, and it shows that 0. Now it shows that my Nation of Immigrants is page 1 as I go through this paper. And as I'm looking at this now, I need to I'm going to close out, and with this header now, I'll close that out. And the problem is, as I'm looking at this here, is we're going to have to tell it we want to update the table so that it updates the page numbers, which it will do for us. Okay. Now at this point in time, we're not going to worry that we have this information showing. However, if we click in here and we say different first page, that would turn that off for us, just as we did in the previous chapter. The final thing that you're going to do is you're going to create a cover page for this. You can either use the cover page option within the software, or you can create it yourself. Then when you're ultimately done, you're going to print the title page that you've created, your table of contents, and your report itself, and then you'll staple that and turn that into